A coat and hat wearing agent is walking down a hallway. He has two briefcases with him as he walks toward a set of stairs that lead under the building. There, he finds a hidden time bomb, and he opens his briefcase right away. That ends up being the case. The agent carefully takes the bomb apart, but another person walks into the room and stops him. The agent gets his gun out and starts looking for the enemy. The enemy jumps out of nowhere and hits the agent with a shot. The agent strikes back, but the bomb is about to go off, so he lets his guard down and puts the bomb in the gadget. Just before the bomb goes off, it burns the man's face and knocks him back. The agent who was burned screams in pain and reaches for his other case. The other person shows up at last, but instead of helping him get to the burning man, he helps him get to the other case. The two people look at each other for a moment before one of them walks away. The burning man then enters something into the case in a last-ditch effort to save himself. After the event, the agent wakes up in a hospital bed with bandages all over him. His bosses meet him and praise him for his hard work. They tell him to forget about the failed mission and focus on getting some rest and getting ready for the last one. The person he was trying to catch turned out to be the Fizzle Bomber, a very sneaky criminal. The Fizzle Bomber has done many small attacks, but they were nothing compared to the bomber's grand plan. In 1975, somewhere in New York, there was a large-scale attack that killed many people, even though the person who did it was told to move on with his failed mission. The agent wants to stop the Fizzle Bomber even more. One more time. After the agent has rested for a while, the doctor finally takes off his bandages and tells him that he will be ready for his next mission. The doctor also tells the agent that his voice will sound very different when he gets better because of his injury. The agent looks in the mirror and sees that his face is different and scarred. The agent knows and agrees with the changes he has made. 7 years to do nothing. The man's face finally got better over time. He takes out his voice recorder and starts to write down what he has seen and done. He says that he is almost ready to leave for his next and last mission. He tells them more about why his mission is important and how it will help them get closer to their final goal. Give the agent his weapons and remind him of the rules while he is getting his superiors ready. They tell him that he will be killed by lethal injection if he goes off course from his mission. All of this is okay with the agent, so they give him the case from before. After everything is over, he leaves for his last job in the middle of the night in a city bar. The agent works as a bartender undercover and seems to be waiting for someone to come in. Then, a person in a coat and hat walks into the bar and orders a drink right away. The bartender gives the person a drink while trying to talk to them in a subtle way. They talk about the Fizzle Bomber for a little while, but then they move on to something else. The person says that he is a writer, the single mother, and that he makes his living by writing confession stories. The man who works at the bar knows what's going on. He writes to him and gives him a magazine he's been reading. The writer is surprised that a man who works in a bar reads his work, since he doesn't fit the target audience. The writer also says that what he writes is not worth reading. The bartender tells him that he sometimes reads his magazines to get a woman's point of view. He is curious about how a man could know what a woman thinks. The writer tells the bartender that he used to be a girl, which surprises the bartender. Before the bartender could ask more about it, the writer starts telling his life story. On September 13, 1945, it all began. He was taken from his home as a newborn and left at the door of an orphanage. She was taken in by an orphanage, which gave her the name Jane. Jane was always interested in space when she was young. Jane was jealous of kids whose parents asked how and what it feels like. Jane didn't know why her parents gave up on her or what she did wrong to deserve being left alone. But as Jane got older, she felt like she was changing. Jane was more self-aware and curious than the other girls in the orphanage. Jane promised her children that, unlike her, they would have a real family, so she focused on other things, like learning how to fight. Jane was the strongest of all the kids, including the boys. Also, she was the smartest person in the class. She liked math and science, and she was good at everything. But none of the kids liked her, and they saw her as. Jane came to hate herself in the end. She knew that because she was different, it was very unlikely that she would be adopted. Jane knew that no one would take her as their daughter or even as their wife. Years later, Jane was about to finish school and was about to meet Mr. Robertson. Robertson was looking for young women like Jane to work for the government on a group called Space Corps, which might have something to do with space travel. Robertson explained that more. They looked for women with a lot of potential in math and science and who were physically strong. Jane said yes to the invitation and sent in a job application. Jane told the panel what she thought about her role in the journey when they asked her about it during the interview. She told them what she was going to do. She took what the group wants from her seriously, so she was accepted. Space Corps gave the volunteers special training to see if they were ready to go into space. They gave Jane and the volunteers a high-tech simulation of space that they could see. Jane was full of life and excitement at the thought of going to space, but some of the volunteers couldn't handle it. Many of the volunteers had trouble with the endurance and written tests that Space Corps gave them, but Jane did great and passed quickly. Space Corps also used a machine that read the interviewee's heartbeat to find out if they were telling the truth or not. There, they learned that Jane had been thinking about love. Jane also said that she doesn't feel right and that she thinks the other volunteers don't like her. Shortly after, Jane got into a fight with one of the volunteers. She beat the girl with constant parry and multiple strong punches to the face, which knocked her down. The staff stopped them right away and took them to the clinic outside so that Dr. Hansa could tell Robertson about something in Jane's body. The doctor then told Robertson that it would make her ineligible, but Robertson told the doctor not to tell Jane and that Jane was kicked out, but no one told her why. Robertson came up to her while she was packing, and she told him that she was just protecting herself. Robertson tells Jane that he will do everything he can to get her back in the program. Jane couldn't count on Robertson, even though he said she could. She had to find other ways to make money. Jane was a house helper for a poor family during the day. She did their chores. Jane found confession story magazines there and started enjoying reading them to her PAS. Jane went to school at night to work on her manners, but she had trouble learning. Jane met the man who would change her life at that time. On a rainy night, Jane bumped into a man and said she was sorry. Jane then asked the man if he was lost, and he told her that he was just waiting for someone. Jane's answer was a quote, "Those who waited got good things." The man replied with the rest of the quote, but only the things left behind by those. Jane couldn't believe that they both thought the same thing. Jane tells the bartender more about the man, like how he was handsome and had enough money to take care of her. Jane loved how the man treated her, and the bartender laughs at her as if he knows how the story ends. Jane asks the bartender if he has ever done something stupid out of love. The bartender says he has, so he knows how Jane feels. Jane tells the bartender that being with that man was the best time of her life, but it didn't last long. He told Jane to sit on the bench and wait. Jane was told that the man would come back, but he never did. Jane tells the bartender that she knows the relationship is just a spark, so she was able to move on quickly and keep hoping to go back to Space Corporation. Then Robertson came one day. Robertson told Jane the truth, which was that the organization he worked for was not for space travel. It was a secret government agency that fixed wrongdoings and only used Space Corp to find extraordinary people who didn't have families, memories, or plans for the future. People like Jane. Jane tells the bartender that she didn't know what the job meant, but she knew it would make her life better until she found out she was pregnant and Robertson never showed up again. Jane thought her life was over after the mysterious man left her with more than just a broken heart. Jane went to a charity ward with other pregnant women, but she felt like she was the only one there. One night, Jane was in pain on an operating table, and the nurses and doctors were ready to let the baby out the next morning. When Jane woke up after the surgery, a doctor came to check on her. Jane is very happy when the doctor tells her that the cesarean went well and that the baby girl is healthy. Then, though, everything changed. When the doctor asked Jane if any doctors had ever told her how her body was doing, she was confused and told him that no doctors had ever told her anything and that everything was fine. The doctor then tells Jane that she had both a female and a male reproductive organ inside of her. Despite being underdeveloped, the female set was good enough for a baby to grow from it. Then, the doctor tells her that she had to have a hysterectomy because she had a lot of bleeding after birth and they had to remove her reproductive organs. But they were able to put her back together again, and she was able to grow male reproductive parts, even though she will need more surgery. Jane was shocked by the news. It made her cry and she couldn't understand what had happened. The doctor keeps telling her that she will be okay. Jane keeps taking care of her baby daughter and telling her that she is the best thing that has ever happened to her. Jane told the nurse that she wanted to name her baby after herself when she was asked about a name. Jane was now very sure that she would raise the baby well, but an older man took the baby from the hospital nursery and took him somewhere else. Jane did everything she could, but she never found her baby and the person who took it was never found. Then she had a second problem. Jane had to have 3 major surgeries and stay in the hospital for 11 months so that she would look like a man. She felt broken because of everything, and she was losing herself in the process. Jane looked in the mirror after 11 months and saw a different person, finally coming to terms with the fact that the girl he used to be is gone. Jane tells the bartender that every time he looked in the mirror, he thought of the person who ruined his life. Jane tries very hard to sign up for Space Corp again, but she can't. They knew about his story and decided that he wasn't fit for space travel. This put an end to the future she had hoped for. So, to move on with his life, Jane changed his name and moved to New York. He started looking for ways to make money, which led him to his current job as the single mother who writes confession stories for a living. This is how Jane ends the story. In a strange turn of events, the bartender then asks Jane if she would kill the man if she had the chance. Jane said that she would do it in an instant. So, the bartender tells Jane that he knows the person and can get him to do what she wants. She doesn't believe him. So, the bartender finds out that Jane's real name is John, which she didn't even say. John still isn't sure, so the bartender tells him that he works for Robertson, which makes John finally decide to follow him. The agent takes him down to the cellar and shows him his field kit, telling him that it is a time machine and that they will both use it to go back in time. John is still suspicious of the bartender until the agent stands next to him and tells him to stay, keep holding the case, and tell the woman to close her eyes. The agent and John then leave the cellar together. In 1963, John and the agent go to Cleveland, Ohio. John is messed up from the trip, but he gets better over time. The agent gives John some money and tells him where the man is before he leaves for the mission. John is still not sure what's going on, but the agent tells him that the man who ruined his life could be the bomb that doesn't work. The agent then tells him that he can finally get the job if he kills the man. The agent then sends John on his mission on that rainy night. In disguise, John makes his way to the fateful hallway where he was supposed to meet his past self. He runs into a girl and quickly turns away from her. John tells the girl that he was waiting for someone. The girl asks if she was lost. The girl then tells him the saying, "Those who wait are rewarded." John finally puts the pieces together and realizes that he was the man the whole time. He says the rest of the quote in response. John turns around to see Jane. When he sees her, he is shocked. John tells Jane that she is beautiful and that someone should have told her that before. Jane smiles and says that he just did that while all of this is going on. The agent stands far away and watches them for a while before leaving. The agent goes back to the place where his mission failed, but this time he sees the bomber who just finished setting up the bomb. When the bomber sees the agent, he moves out of the way of his first shot. They have a short gun battle, but the bomber gets away. The agent tries to catch him, but ends up in a dark part of the basement. The agent looks for the bomber slowly, but the bomber sneaks up behind him and they get into a short fist fight. The bomber hits the agent in the face with a strong punch and knocks him out. Soon after, the agent hears gunshots that are familiar to him. This makes him get up and go to the bomb. There, he sees a picture of himself when he burned his face. The agent walks up to the man in pain and helps him get to his field kit. The two gay men briefly look at each other. The former agent gets away from the scene by going back in time. The agent realizes that he is doomed to fail. Then, he picks up a piece of the bomb and takes it with him. Tom then leaves. The agent goes back to 1964 to get even. He cleans up, thinks about the next part of his mission, and tells himself about it. John and Jane go out for coffee in 1963 while John is recording everything. Jane starts the conversation by telling John that she's not a friendly person. John knows this very well, so he tells Jane straight out that the reason Jane is surprised by how similarly they see other people is because they feel better than other people. Jane asks John what it is that makes him think he is better than other people. John says in a witty way that he can read minds, which makes Jane agree to let him rehearse. John starts to tell her the truth about who she is, what she is going through, and what she thinks about love. At first, Jane says no, but as time goes on, she starts to like John. John then tells Jane that he understands how hard Jane's life has been and that he feels a lot like she does. The two keep having fun talking to each other, and in the end, they kiss. The agent is now in the hallway of a hospital when Robertson shows up to meet him. The agent gives him the bomb's piece, which makes Robertson realize that the agent jumped over a line. Robertson, on the other hand, doesn't mind this because he thinks that agents who don't have to follow rules could save more lives. The agent says that he doesn't want to do the next task because what he's about to do will cause Jane so much pain. Robertson explains why the agent has to finish his mission to keep an agent, who was made by a predestination paradox, from dying out, a person who has no roots in. Like John, Robertson tells the agent that he is doing the right thing and then leaves. The nurse then leaves the room, and Jane's baby is taken by the agent. The agent brings the baby back to his home and gets it ready. The agent puts in the date September 13, 1945, and then carefully takes the baby with him and travels back in time. The agent changes his clothes and takes the baby back to where it all began, at the orphanage. The agent says the baby's name is both John and Jane to wish her well. The agent then calls the orphanage to let them know that the baby is at the door. The agent goes back to Cleveland, Ohio in 1963. From a distance, he sees John and Jane sitting on a bench. John sees the agent and tells Jane to wait for him. He then walks over to the agent, feeling very deceived. John pulls his gun out and points it at the agent. The agent knows how painful it is for him, but he still tells him that everything had to happen that way. John tells the agent that he loves Jane for real, and the agent agrees with him. The agent then tells John who Jane is supposed to turn into, who she is now, and who the agent is. John can't say anything now that he understands everything, so the agent tells him that everything is going as it should. John takes one more look at Jane. He doesn't want to leave her, but he finally accepts that he has to. John is taken to the headquarters by the agent, who tells him that he will finally have a good life. John is too tired to go on after the jump, so the nurse takes him to rest. Robertson and the agent talk outside. Robertson says that John had to go through his whole life to become the person who will stop crimes. First, the agent is still worried about the Fizzle bomber going rogue. Robertson tells him that the Fizzle bomber made the agency stronger. The agent is taken aback by this comment. Then Robertson gives him the timer, the bomber that didn't work. Robertson then tells the agent that his field kit will be turned off as required once he gets to his final destination. The agent agrees, so Robertson gives him a pat and they bid against each other. The agent says goodbye, leaves his taped messages next to John, and then leaves. The agent then goes to New York, which is his last stop, 1975, a few months before the big explosion. The agent sits back and relaxes in a chair while he waits for his gear to be taken out of service. But he is surprised when the kit doesn't work. Then, the agent follows up on the new lead. Robertson left him, but he finds out that Robertson still wants him to find the Fizzle. In the meantime, the agent looks for a typewriter and finds one in an antique store. He buys the typewriter and begins to write a book. When the book is done, the agent reveals that he was always John and that the book was about his whole life. Soon after, John starts to put together the clues about the Fizzle bomber and comes to a terrible conclusion. He grabs his gun and heads to the laundromat. John charges at the Fizz with his gun to find an older version of himself. John is very sad about what he has become, but the bomber says that all he did was stop someone else from dying by killing someone. John talks to the bomber about the people he kills. He then tells the bomber in a very angry tone that he will never be like him. But the bomber tells him that it was already planned for John to be the Fizzle bomber, just like everything else in their lives. He goes on to say that John will be the next bomber if he kills him. The bomber then tells him that the only way to get out of the paradox is not to kill him, but to let him love him again instead. But John doesn't think twice and shoots the bomber, killing him in a cruel way. Everything now makes sense. The paradox will keep happening over and over again. The baby, the young Jane, the adult John, the mother who wasn't married, the lover who no one knew much about, and the agent were all the same person. Now that he is an agent, John is ready to move on to the next part of his life. So it's time to take John out of service. His next move was already planned.